and going on social media in just a couple of seconds.
Right, I'm activating YouTube broadcast.
Looks like it's working. And going on social media.
Erica, just give me a signal when you're gonna start and I'm gonna press recording.
Sounds good. I will check in with Janet. Janet, let us know when you're ready, and then I'll also make sure Ryan's here, and then we should be good to go. We might be a little late today because it is a special date for our meeting. Hey, Janet.
Hello. Yes. Yeah, it is on a Monday, so a couple minutes and then go through the introductory translation stuff. And
yeah, we've always got about 5-10 minutes or so where people log in. Thank you. Air District team, just let me know when you guys are ready as well. Thanks to those of you that are joining us this evening. We've got some instructions on the screen for you for how to rename and change your screen name. And we also have instructions for how to sign into the Spanish language interpretation. We're going to get started in just a couple of moments. And we are grateful that you're spending this special Monday with us. And we'll get going in just a few. Well, we do have a pretty busy agenda, so we might as well go ahead and just get going. And certainly we have a few housekeeping items at the very beginning, so that'll give everyone just a few moments to log in if they're running a little bit late. But we'll go ahead and get started. So good evening to all of you, and thank you for joining us. If you are just joining us for the first time in this meeting, welcome. We're happy to have you. And if you're a regular, we're happy to have you as well. My name is Erica Manuel. I'm the head of a nonprofit organization called ILG, and I am happy to lead the facilitation team for this AB 617 community. I'm here with my team members, Hannah and Julia, who are waving on their little screens right now. And they may or may not be visible to you, but hopefully if you need anything from them, please feel free to chat them privately or otherwise on this Zoom. They are available to help with any behind-the-scenes technical details or other challenges or questions you might have about the logistics of this meeting. Julia is actually a new member of the ILG team, and we're really excited to have her on board. She leads our equity and engagement work, and you'll be seeing a little bit more of her in the next few weeks. So again, we are committed to making sure that this is an inclusive process. So I want to make sure we are able to ensure that our Spanish language interpretation and Spanish language line are all working and everything is good to go. So I'd like to check in with Yesenia and see if everything is okay, and if you can provide the traditional introduction so that those that would like to log into the Spanish line are able to do that.
Of course, Erika. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias por unirse a la llamada de hoy. Si usted gusta escuchar la plática de hoy en español, puede hacer esto usando los controles de Zoom que se encuentran en la parte de abajo de la pantalla. Tiene que hacer clic en interpretación. También ahí, ya que encuentre el icono de mundo, debe hacer clic en el idioma que desea escuchar, en este caso español, o puede también cambiarle en inglés en cualquier momento. Para escuchar solo el idioma de interpretación en español, haga clic en silenciar audio original. Si tiene alguna pregunta durante la reunión, utilice la función de chat y escriba su pregunta.
Y si tiene algún problema técnico a través de Zoom, también está el teléfono gratuito que está aquí en la pantalla para ustedes. En caso otra vez de que tengan algún problema técnico a través de Zoom, el número de teléfono cual puede llamar es el 888-240-3210 y el código de acceso es 5929-510 y luego tecla o el signo de número. Gracias. Y si tiene algún problema técnico, como otra vez mencionó Yesenia, puede ponerlo a través del chat o puede dejar sabernos por levantar la mano o simplemente decirnos que está teniendo algún problema técnico. Gracias.
Excellent. Thank you both. And I think if we're good to go, we'll continue. And we're excited to have everyone on the line tonight. So once again, we welcome everyone who's joining, and we're excited to continue making progress on improving the air quality here in South Central Fresno. So I will be the facilitator of your meeting today, along with our community co-host, Janet Gardner. And we're so excited to have that participation. My role will be to be a neutral facilitator. We'll make sure that all the voices are heard, that our tone in our discussions are respectful, and that we accomplish all the key objectives from our agenda. My job is also to stay on schedule, and so we want to make sure that our meeting starts on time and ends on time, which is why we're trying to stay within the parameters of the meeting times that were posted on the agenda. So we've had a number of Zoom meetings, and we are not going to go through all of the details of those meetings, but here's a couple key reminders just to keep you fresh and top of mind. The biggest things to remember are to make sure that your screen name is accurate, and we showed that slide right before that basically said how to change your screen name. I'm happy to do that for you. If you have any challenges, we certainly can help. The other thing to do is to remember to stay on mute when you are not talking to minimize background noise. We want to make sure that we take all the comments as they come, and that you also, just one quick second, and you also have the opportunity to share with all of your colleagues and your CSC members. And so we want to make sure that raising that hand and staying on mute help keep the volume low and also keep us kind of structured in our approach. If you are in the stipend program, you will need to stay in this meeting for 75% of the meeting to get credit for it. And that's pretty standard. Those of you that are residents are pretty familiar with this for now, but if you have any issues or questions, please do let us know. These CSC meetings are always open to the public, and we're grateful to those public members that participate by Facebook. I know a couple of you are on the line today. They're on Facebook, they're on YouTube, and you're also on this line on Zoom. Any members of the public on Zoom or on social media will be asked to participate in the public comment portion of our meeting at the very end. And as always, any comments and questions that are posted on those sites or in the email at av617@valleyair.org during the meeting will be addressed during that public comment period. One other housekeeping note is that when you logged on today, you probably got a note that said that this meeting is being recorded. That's just a formality for you. We do record the meetings to make sure that we can keep track of everything that took place. So before we move to the other portion of the agenda, I want to ask if there are any participants logging in by phone or in a group that we need to be checking or renaming for attendance purposes. Sometimes we have a couple people clustered together and we love that sense of camaraderie. Is there anybody that we can rename, anybody that we can check in for an attendance purpose? I don't see anybody yet. If you do have any groups of you that are all together, feel free to drop your names in the chat and we'll make sure to get you tracked in that chat record so that we can make sure that your resident stipends, if you are a resident, are applied. All right. Next slide, please. All right, so showing on the screen are some tips for how we can engage as a committee. You have seen these before, so this is really just a refresher for our new attendees and the general public. Productive discussion, respectful dialogue, these are all very standard things that we have in professional meetings, so I don't think any of this will be surprise to you or even unfamiliar. We just want to make sure to throw it up on the slide in English and in Spanish to make sure that there's clarity on how we plan to facilitate and officiate today's discussion. Next slide. Oh, perfect. Yeah, showing in Spanish as well. No, sorry, you can go back up. I wanted to make sure the Spanish slide was showing as well. We are so excited and grateful that so many of you are working to improve the air quality in Fresno and the health outcomes in Fresno. You guys are all here really to make sure that you make a difference in this, and we want to give you every opportunity to do that with this process. And so these two slides really in English and Spanish just reflect that intent and that approach. And then for the past few meetings, we have given each community co-host the opportunity to kind of define how they wanted to run their meeting within the structure of this. And so we wanted to give every community co-host the opportunity to contribute kind of in their own way. And so today's meeting is no exception. We're very supportive and excited to have a facilitation tonight in support with community co-host Janet Gardner. So at this time, I would love to hear from Janet, maybe then Ryan, as your Air District host, just for that welcome.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to work with everyone, and I hope we move along farther. It's a good agenda. It is a packed agenda. So let's just move right into it. See what we can get done.
Awesome, Janet. Thank you. And Ryan, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, I think Janet did an excellent job of capturing my sentiments. It is good to see everybody, and I am too looking forward to the conversation tonight on the various topics and updates. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, with that in mind, let's move to the next slide and talk about that, the next topics of the agenda that we've got. So the agenda is showing on your screens. As you can see, we've got a few things to cover, including the planning review, some enforcement updates, some standing updates. And we do have a pretty strong agenda and some relatively tight timeframes, but we do plan to have about a 2-hour meeting that will end no later than 7:30 tonight. And so we're excited to begin that conversation with you. Before we get started, any questions about the agenda, or Janet, any comments for you?
Nothing from my end. The agenda looks good. We do need to hear the planning review and all the enforcement updates and see where we're at and what our next steps are. So
perfect. Thank you both. All right, so we are going to stop the screen share, and we'll just give a quick update on the annual planning review. So the first agenda item that was shown on that screen is to update everybody on the annual planning process. And we've done this a couple times for the last few meetings. And if you remember, at the last meeting, we didn't really have the chance to cover all of the update. And so at this meeting tonight, you're going to hear a little bit more about the next steps from our annual planning process and the great suggestions that you provided. One of the things about the planning is to figure out how to make sure that there's accountability and transparency in how you're moving forward with suggestions. And this is an opportunity for you all to get that update from the Air District. So I'm going to turn that over to Jess with the Air District for that update on annual planning review, and we'll then open it up for questions or comments if you have any.
Great, thank you, Erica, and thank you all for being here. I know it's an odd feeling to have this on a Monday, so I appreciate, I see more and more people keep adding on, so hopefully we get a really well-attended meeting. As Erica and Janet mentioned, this is really just to sort of be an ongoing touch base on all of the feedback that we all gave over really what was ended up being 3 to 4 meetings, kind of depending on how you broke it up in your mind, especially with that extra meeting we had on strategic or annual planning. So what I'm going to do is share a couple of things and then really just take any questions that you all have as we move forward in implementing a lot of the great suggestions. So this is our South Central Fresno page under Steering Committee Documents. In both English and in Spanish, we have all of those live notes we took during some of those strategic planning prioritization meetings. And so just as an example, I'm going to click on one of them and show you, if you haven't had a chance or it's been maybe a while since you've looked at this, you can see as we go through this, all of the sort of categories we had. So if it was reporting about subcommittee activities or website updates, what was working well and what suggestions you had. And so we posted this really in an effort to be transparent about all of the feedback you've given the district. And so the district has sort of a running checklist of things that we're going to work with you on either implementing or improving or continuing to do if it was something that was working well. So with that, I'm going to go back to today's meeting actually. And I'm showing you this just in case people don't typically go to the website. Always going through and seeing kind of what other things besides the agenda has in store is always a good exercise. But what we did is we took a couple just so we can sort of do these things in bite-sized pieces at these next several meetings, as we took a couple of different topics and worked to see how we, the district, are working maybe now that since the moment we heard it, or how we can work with you all to address some of these main concerns. And so the first I'm just going to mention is the agenda and community co-host. So a lot of the committee feedback, and maybe even reflected tonight, depending on how tonight goes, are the agendas are very packed. They don't leave a lot of space for discussion. The co-host should be more involved in prepping for the meetings and maybe have a more meaningful role in running the meeting. By the way, can everyone see this? Am I zoomed in far enough? I'm going to look for like thumbs up and nods. Great, thank you.
I think you did a good job.
Thank you. So for the district action, and this is something that will continue to evolve, and you that were a part of the agenda setting meeting might have seen this, but the agenda setting meetings, we've now decided to hold a week after the CSC meeting. So you will actually see in your inbox tomorrow or Wednesday, a set schedule or a doodle poll rather to set a schedule for agenda setting meetings that will regularly occur the week after the CSC meeting. And that allows us better time. You've hopefully noticed that we have worked closer with the co-host in prepping the agenda and making sure we actually, this isn't even noted here, but we're now sending the draft agenda out to everyone. So everyone has an ample opportunity well before the day the agenda has to be posted to provide input, let us know if we captured everything, and then really, being flexible and open. So an example is tonight's meeting. There are several little things that we need to touch base on. And so if things kind of move late or we need to readjust them, that, as you saw with our meeting last time, we hit 2 agenda topics. Those were the things people really wanted to talk about. And we were flexible at that agenda setting meeting to moving them.
Hey, Jess, really quickly, we're getting a request to talk a little slower for the translation.
Absolutely. And then I do see Naimeen's hand. Naimeen, do you have a question? Or did you want me to wait until I finish this?
You can finish, Jessica. I can ask my question after the presentation.
Okay, maybe I'll finish this if it's related to this slide, and then I'll go to the next slide after you have your question. I was just going to say, one of the things we definitely, our next steps, and obviously we know everything we've done so far isn't perfect, is we want that feedback. So we want, of course, feedback from everyone on the agenda as we send it out. And then we also want feedback from the co-hosts. The most recent 2 that we've had since we've started doing a more robust, meaningful engagement were Eric Payne and now Janet Gardner. And we worked with both of them, and you'll see Janet's is going to look different than Eric's, I'm sure, and everyone's will look differently. But what we've done is we've checked in with the co-hosts multiple times, asked them sort of what their role, what they see their role as, and then sort of fit the meeting to their desires and how they want to run the meeting. And so that's something we want, that feedback, not only from you all, how you felt, but specifically the co-hosts. Did you feel like you were engaged or that you were participatory? Do you still feel like more meaningful engagement is what you're interested in? And so that's kind of the feedback we're looking for there. Naimeen, before I go to the next one, let's chat.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, so, obviously you're saying that there's going to be an opportunity to provide feedback about the agendas. For example, I wasn't able to participate in the planning meeting for this agenda. So when is the right moment? Because, for example, I was looking at my notes of what were kind of like the main takeaways and commitments from our previous meeting, and I didn't see any of that included in today's agenda. So when would be the right moment to give that feedback? You know, I didn't want to send my feedback the day that I saw the agenda because I don't know if it was too late for that or not. So it would be good to know.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. One is maybe what we can do a better job when we set that agenda setting meeting of making a space for that feedback for folks that can't make it. So that's a really good point of like, hey, if you can't send it now, you know, of course. Two is it's definitely not too late, especially with that draft agenda we sent out before the final agenda. That's exactly another good opportunity. But you're right, Naimeen, I don't know that we were very clear in that. I think we can definitely be clearer. And so I see your point. And then to your third point, or your main point rather, I'll get to that here in a second, is holding us accountable for some of those action items. We have a plan that we hope will help, you know, be a better feedback loop between the Air District and the CSC on your point about follow-up and action items. So I will go to my next, and I did this in not a PowerPoint, so I can zoom in a little bit. So hopefully I'm not making anyone dizzy. So meeting action items, to Naimeen's point, accessibility and follow-up. So definitely more accountability and transparency in the district's response to action items. Provide a district staff contact for each measure that will allow the CSC involvement and follow-up maybe on particular items as well. And so one of the things, and you'll see it hopefully today, is that's the goal, is what we're going to do is at the end of each meeting, and then something we can bring up at the agenda setting meeting, is actually having a written display of action items. That way we can all see it together. It's all going to be recorded in the meeting, so we all know that everyone saw what the next steps were. And then of course, you've already seen that district contacts have been added. Hopefully you've already seen, I should say, to each measure on the tracker. And then one of the main requests too for accountability, transparency, and something that we've started to do and we will continue to do is the subcommittees, much like the regular meetings, if anything more so sometimes, there's a lot of real decision making and action happening in terms of what the committee is really driving for. And so having agendas and summaries posted just like a regular CSC meeting is something that we've committed and already done and created a section for on the website. So the next steps really is to continue to work on that running action item list to share with the CSC. And like I said, and really to Naimeen's point, we don't want to just share that at the end of the meeting, but that could be our starting point for the agenda setting meeting. So it's all something everyone's heard. And if people can't make the agenda setting, at least they know it was an action item from hopefully the CSC meeting that they did get a chance to make. Any questions on this before I move on? I don't know, Naimeen, if you rose your hand or if it's just still up. Okay.
It is still up.
Got it. All right. Well, okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you, well, so I'll say a couple things. As you, these are my 2 slides so far. As you know, there were several pages of different categories for comments. And so what we want to do so that we can continue, I think to Janet's point at the beginning of this meeting, pushing forward and getting Serp measures implemented and really getting in the weeds on a lot of these things, is we want to start being transparent on how we're addressing these. And, you know, if it's okay, we can bring this short agenda item, and we'll talk about this at the agenda setting meeting, where maybe the district can present a couple of the different ways that we're hopefully responding, or ask you maybe ways we can continue to respond to those agenda or annual planning, strategic planning items that you all brought up. So it holds us accountable, but it doesn't take up another full meeting or 2 just to go back and forth. We're kind of doing sort of a running check-in and checking in on each other really throughout this process that we're actually getting work done. One of the other things I want to say that will again sort of drive those agenda setting meetings, hopefully, or at least that's the plan, is back here in steering committee documents where I found those other notes are the prioritization survey results. So we've dropped this in the chat several times, but we'll go ahead, maybe I'll ask the team to do it one more time. But these are the results from the survey you all took to sort of order the categories as well as the measures individually within the categories for how often or how much you wanted the CSC to be really like in-depth involved, and how much you maybe wanted other measures, maybe less frequent updates or maybe more streamlined implementation. So this is going to really be a big driver for us to continue to push a lot of these measures forward. And as you can see, and we showed this briefly last time, But as you can see, a lot of the measures that you can tell we already have subcommittees for, we're really in the weeds on, you'll hear about tonight, are ones that did end up making it to the top. But that doesn't mean we're not implementing the ones down here. It just means that we'll provide more streamlined updates, or you can find those updates a little bit easier in the tracker. So hopefully, if it hasn't already been, if someone could drop that in the chat, you can kind of look at your leisure at what those prioritization results were. And again, we'll use this with the next co-host and every co-host moving forward at those agenda setting meetings to kind of touch base with what we think the committee's goals are for all of the meetings. And so with that, I will stop sharing and see if there are other questions before we move on.
Wonderful. So Jess just provided an overview of sort of how the Air District plans to report back on the annual planning and some of the suggestions that you all provided during that process of, implementation feedback and how you think implementation can work over the course of at least this year, thinking through what works well, what doesn't work well, what could use some improvement. So maybe we'll start with Janet and then we'll open it up to some questions. Janet, does this align with, based on kind of what your thoughts are, align with what your expectations were from the annual planning and what you think will work as we look at the remainder of 2021 and how you think implementation can be kind of really clarified and provided reporting can be really clear for the CSE?
I think taking those priorities that people were looking at and hopefully getting them to implementation and seeing what the results and the effects of implementing them is going to be a huge, have an impact, and see that we are getting things done and are making the air better. So just seeing that and having that website available where everyone can go and look and see what we've done as a committee and what the priorities are and working together to get there. Yeah, that's
great. Thank you. Any other comments, either from the Spanish line or anyone else? Comments or questions? Seeing none, we will keep moving. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Thank you for that. Well, Jess, thanks for the update. And we are already beginning this process of incorporating all the requests and recommendations that you put into fruition during our planning efforts. At the last meeting of this committee, we did real-time notes. I'm doing that again, at least in English tonight, and we'll show those on the screen, and then they will be sent to the Air District and will be translated and shared with you all again as well. So there will be some record for you to use for your agenda setting meetings for at least the action items from the last meeting. It doesn't necessarily mean that's a comprehensive list, but it certainly is at least from the most recent conversation. So we'll recap those at the wrap up tonight, and then you'll also have a version of it you can use in your agenda planning moving forward. All right, so our next agenda item is enforcement update. And we have two presenters today. One is going to be from the Air District and one is going to be from CARB. And I think we have Jason Lawler from the Air District who we'll start with, and then we'll turn it over to CARB to give the chance to share anything else.
Yes, good evening, everyone. This is Jason Lawler from the Valley Air District. I'm the compliance manager here in our Fresno office, and I'll be giving our enforcement updates for the district tonight. Let me just share my screen real quick and start up the presentation. Okay, does everybody see the first slide? Awesome. All right, well, this is a month delayed. This was originally, we were going to present this last month. This is mostly going to cover our enforcement updates for the first quarter of 2021. And we'll go through each of the enforcement measures from the Serp kind of one by one. Here's just a quick overview. There's 6 of them. Most of these are enhanced enforcement measures. So enhanced enforcement for wood burning curtailments, reducing illegal burning of residential waste, Regulation 8 fugitive dust requirements, statewide anti-idling regulation, the enhanced inspection frequency for stationary sources, and then the last one is the pilot training program for conducting self-inspections at gas stations. So our first one is our residential wood burning curtailments. This is our Check Before You Burn program that runs each year through from November through February of each year. This is curtailments that are put in effect, declared based on the PM 2.5 levels, designed to limit localized impacts from wood smoke here in the valley. Our district enforcement staff regularly conducts surveillance throughout the valley whenever one of these curtailments are declared. They're declared each day by county. And under this particular Serp measure, we committed to do enhanced enforcement in the South Central Fresno community. And so what that means is, on an ordinary day, without this measure, our enforcement staff would be out doing surveillance, all throughout the valley whenever a curtailment is declared. And on any given day, our staff is going to be spread out, all across, out of our Fresno office, we cover about 3 counties. So, we may be in North Fresno one day, South Fresno the next day. We do have limited staff, but with this enforcement measure in the Serp, we've committed to, in addition to all of the surveillance we're already doing, conducting specifically 4 hours of dedicated surveillance in the South Central Fresno community on each day a curtailment is declared for Fresno County. So we're guaranteeing that we're going to be doing surveillance in the community every day. As a result of that, over this past winter season from November through February, we confirmed 76 documented violations within the 617 community where enforcement action was taken. And, we continue to work with the CSC to, identify areas where burning is more prevalent and respond to your public complaints. The next measure is our enhanced enforcement to reduce illegal burning of residential waste. This is enforcement of our District Rule 4103, which is our open burning rule, and also the California Code of Regulations, that section there, which is the airborne toxic control measure for residential open burning in California. This is aimed at preventing localized PM 2.5 and toxic impacts from, the illegal open burning of residential waste. Our district enforcement staff responds to public complaints of illegal burning and investigates smoke plumes throughout the course of their daily work. And through this commitment in the Fresno Serp, we also committed to doing enhanced enforcement within the community, which consists of conducting additional focused surveillance in the community during each calendar quarter, on top of just responding to those complaints and investigating smoke plumes as we see them. We're actually out there actively driving around looking for violations. So as a result of our efforts over the course of the first quarter of 2021, we did confirm 2 violations that were documented and enforcement action taken within the community. And again, we continue to take feedback from the steering committee. If you know of any areas where burning is prevalent, we encourage you to report those complaints to us, or send me a message in the chat or an email after the meeting today, and we'd be happy to go and investigate those. The next up is our enhanced enforcement of fugitive dust requirements. This is the district's rules that limit potential for localized PM10 impacts associated with dust emissions from construction and earth moving activities, open areas, and unpaved roads. Our enforcement staff responds to dust complaints from the public, as well as performing periodic inspections on larger construction sites that ensure compliance with their approved dust control plans. So for larger construction projects, once they're over a certain size, they're required to have what's called a dust control plan on file with the district. And for those larger projects, we do conduct periodic inspections on those. Now, through this Serp measure for enhanced enforcement, what that consists of is additional site visits to all of our active construction projects on file with the district, which includes not only the ones with dust control plans, but also any smaller projects that have just a construction notification on file with us. And we're visiting those at least once during the second quarter of the year, and again during the third quarter of each year. And those 2 quarters were identified, in the Serp because that's during the summertime when the dust is expected to be more prevalent. So again, this update, this go around was mostly covering, our activities during the first quarter of the year. So we weren't out there doing all of those enhanced visits to sites, but we did receive a couple of complaints that we responded to. I believe they were just leaf blower complaints, but again, we are getting into that summertime now. It's getting hot. If you were outside last week, so if you see dust around town, feel free to report that to us if there's any areas that in particular that you want us to check out. Next, we have our enhanced enforcement of the statewide anti-idling regulation. This one, we're doing our district enforcement in partnership with CARB of the state anti-idling regulation for heavy-duty diesel trucks and buses to reduce PM2.5 and toxic air quality impacts. The district does periodically partner with CARB to enforce the statewide anti-idling regulation throughout the valley, but through this Serp measure in particular, the district's committed to doing enhanced enforcement of this regulation within the 617 community. So, where normally when we partner with CARB, we may do enforcement, here and there all around the valley. Through this Serp measure, we're doing this enforcement, dedicated enforcement every quarter, specifically within the 617 community. And that additional focused enforcement over the course of the first quarter, we did confirm 1 violation during the first quarter and issue enforcement action for that. And again, like all of these other measures, we encourage the steering committee to continue reporting any concerns to us. You can either file a complaint, and we'll review again how you can file a complaint in a couple of slides here, or feel free to message me in the chat or send me an email anytime. Then our enhanced inspection frequency of permitted stationary sources. So we have within the 617 community, there's over 350 permitted facilities with the district. And we do inspections at all of those facilities on a regular basis. What this measure committed to was for any of those facilities where we have found in the past 3 years any type of emissions violation, we've increased the frequency which we do those inspections at those facilities to where we're now committing on those facilities, we're inspecting them twice a year. And that will continue and for the duration of the 5 years of implementation, or until one of those facilities has gone 4 consecutive inspections without having an emissions violation. And the purpose of this was to limit the potential for localized air quality impacts due to their failure to comply with emission standards. So the idea there being, the more frequent that we're inspecting these facilities, the quicker we're going to find violations if they're occurring, and the quicker we're going to get them back in compliance. And hopefully also that increased frequency of inspections will also, help to prevent future violations. And based on the commitment in this Serp strategy, out of those 350 plus facilities in the South Central Fresno community, we've identified 41 of those facilities that had an emissions violation somewhere in the last 3 years. And so now they're on that enhanced inspection frequency where we're inspecting them twice a year. Now, overall, during the first quarter of 2021, our inspection staff completed a total of 84 inspections at various facilities within the community. And from those inspections, we found 11 different violations where enforcement action was taken. Out of those 11, 3 of those were emissions related violations, the rest being some administrative type of violations. So, you know, if those 3 violations occurred at a facility that was already on an enhanced frequency, then they'll remain on that 6-month schedule. If they weren't already, then they will now become on a 6-month schedule now that we've found an emissions violation. And then the last measure in the Fresno Serp that's enforcement related was the pilot training program for conducting self-inspections at gasoline stations. And this one in the past, when we've talked about, there hasn't been a great deal of updates. You know, we developed the program last year for doing this hands-on training with gas station operators to train them on how to do their self-inspections to try to prevent, a lot of common leaks at these types of facilities. And for a while, this was on hold due to the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the safety concerns with our staff going out and doing this, face-to-face hands-on training. So at least as of the end of the first quarter, this was still on hold, with the state looking to reopen next week. I believe we're looking to actually go out and begin doing some of these visits and start implementation on this measure. If not here in the end of the second quarter as we go into the third quarter. So again, I just want to cover how you can file a complaint to the district. This is always a good reminder. We do encourage you, if you know of the violations, feel free to report them to us. You can file a complaint by calling the district complaint line, which is the 800 number listed here on the slide, or you can report a complaint through our website, or you can also file a complaint if you have our Valley Air mobile app. You can submit a complaint through the app. And during the first quarter of 2021, the district responded to a total of 18 various public complaints in the 617 community. And those ranged from open burning to residential wood burning, fugitive dust, asbestos, odors, unpermitted equipment, and there was also one for facility emissions. So we do respond to all complaints. So I'd encourage anyone that sees a potential violation, don't hesitate to report that to us, and we'd be happy to investigate. And then up next, I will hand it over to Eric from CARB to talk about their enforcement efforts. Actually,
Jason, before you hand it over to Eric, do you mind answering a couple of the questions that have been flagged in the chat? And we had quite a busy chat activity.
Sure. Yeah, I actually, with the presentation up, I can't see the chat, so.
No problem. I figured that was the case. And so I don't think you answered this in your verbal presentation, but there was a question about permit renewal after 5 years. And there was that people were curious about whether or not stationary sources in the AB 617 area have had all of their renewals up to date.
Yeah.
Do you check on that?
I'll answer those questions.
Okay, great. Okay. And then.
So I'll start off with the Title V permits. Naomi's correct. Those are for the largest sources of air pollution. They have to get what are called Title V permits. It's a permit required under the Clean Air Act. It's a federally issued permit that the district has delegated authority to receive applications and process and issue those permits. And so I've asked our permitting department to look into that question. for an answer, and so we'll be sure to share that information with the steering committee once we have an update on it.
If I may, I want to explain why. I believe, and I hope I'm wrong, and that you can, send us that information, Ryan. But I believe we were not able to get a permit of Rio Bravo, but the most recent one that you guys had was for 2004. So that's way back, past the 5-year threshold. So that would be really great to get.
So you, I mean, in that case, you submitted a public records request for that permit. Is that?
Yes.
Okay, I will. As some of you may have seen, we've trimmed down the people that are from the district that are in attendance from these meetings. And so I will definitely follow up with them in regards to that. And we'll provide an update. But I can definitely tell you that the 2004 is not the latest Title V permit that has been issued. I can definitely say that with certainty.
Yeah, I hope. I do have a couple more questions though. One is, can you explain briefly what is an example of an administrative violation versus the other violations that you described?
Absolutely.
And then one last question before you move on into that. Well, yeah, Genevieve also was curious about, and I do too, of which were the violators, and also in regards to ag burning. Is there a possibility of, for instance, not allowing or giving less ag burning permits in the AB 617 area? I know that when we were discussing the Serp, that was not at the top of the radar, but I think that right now with all the changes with the ag burning, situation in the air district, that might be something important considering. And also the dust, because I've been driving a lot in the rural areas, just, near the 41, and there's, all kinds of tractors creating, tractors in the fields, creating a lot of dust. So is there anything that you're doing for dust mitigation in those places that are like right in the border between AB 617 and the city?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Naimeen. And so I'll address all of your questions. So I'll start off with the difference between, and this is definitely one of those things that we understand that that's challenging, is just the terminology, but the things that we call things don't make sense to everybody. And so I appreciate you pointing out, like, yeah, the term of an administrative violation doesn't, to most people, wouldn't make sense. And so an administrative violation is basically those violations. So you talk about a Title V permit. So a Title V permit may be, for like the glass plant, maybe hundreds of pages long. And so, and it includes many, many conditions that they have to follow and comply with. And not all the conditions that they have to comply with are specifically tied to emissions. So while there are conditions on a permit saying this piece of equipment can only emit this amount of pollution, there are a lot more conditions that we call administrative, those are the things like record keeping, that they have to follow certain requirements for maintaining pieces of equipment. And so as part of our inspections, we verify compliance with all these various conditions. And so those conditions that don't directly apply to emissions, but have more to do with record keeping and maybe some other things, those are what we call administrative violations. What we're talking about emissions is when we can actually quantify and verify that there are emissions that were released as a result of the violations that we detected. So those are the two different categories of violations: administrative, no emissions related, and then emissions violations. To the second point, you asked about whether or not we have the ability to not issue ag burns. If someone comes to us and that they request a burn permit and they meet all of the requirements, we don't really have liberty to say that we can't issue you a permit. Now, that being said, where we have latitude and where we have used it is, we definitely are in the full process of encouraging people to look at alternatives to burning. Every removal request we get, we're talking to them about the alternatives to open agricultural burning incentive program, which thankfully the South Central Fresno Community Steering Committee made that one of the measures in the community emissions reduction program. And we have thankfully been able to get some people to steer them down that road as opposed to burning that material. And that's only going to continue to grow and expand. This past season was a great example where there wasn't a lot of opportunity. And so in a lot of those instances, like people kind of see that's the way that things are going. Like there's just going to be fewer and fewer opportunities to conduct these types of things. And so through our efforts to continue to educate people about the alternatives, hearing from fellow farmers about the benefits of soil incorporation and some other things, those are going to be the things that are going to really help us to meet that 2025 deadline that's being talked about and discussed. And so we're doing everything in our power to really limit the amount of agricultural burning and encouraging people to take advantage of those alternatives. And then the last thing about fugitive dust from ag operations, and this is definitely going to be a bigger issue this year with the water issues. I mean, I'm sure many of you are paying close attention and seeing the reports that are coming out. We're already in an extreme drought right now for much of the state and especially here in the valley, and that has the potential for water restrictions and all sorts of other impacts. And so to kind of talk about the ag and the dust that are generated from their operations, that's definitely something that we have conversations with farmers about. We often receive complaints from people about the dust that are being generated from the ag operations. And when we get those, we share that information with the agricultural operations and see what alternatives there are. We encourage them to take action to reduce the dust, including slowing down the speed, changing the time that they're doing the disking. And I'm glad to say that in the majority of these instances, once they're made aware of the issues and the challenges, they do take action to then limit that dust. Where the district has regulatory authority, we have a rule, which is our conservation management practices rule, which applies to any on-field or applies to on-field agricultural operations over 100 contiguous acres. And it basically requires those farmers to submit plans that basically identify, it has the understanding that in certain areas they may not have ability to limit the amount of dust due to not having technologically feasible alternatives. But it basically outlines where they have opportunity to reduce dust, that they will take active measures to reduce dust from those operations. And so they're required to have plans with us, and we review those plans and we also inspect those as well. So that's, but I mean, at the same time, if someone is being impacted by dust, that's another one of those situations where please take Jason's advice and contact us. I mean, being a former inspector, that was always one of the things I appreciate about our organization, that we are going to reach out to people. We're going to talk to the farmers. We're going to let them know about the impacts that are being felt and work with them to hopefully find solutions to alleviate that.
Thank you, Ryan. There are a number of other questions in the chat, and I want to be mindful of our CARB presentation as well. I've asked Jason to try and answer as many questions as possible in the chat related to this there's specifically some real specific questions about which locations maybe were cited, and there's a couple other questions Larry's asking about private security and a number of other enforcement pieces.
Yeah, I was going
I
to
will
touch
come
on
back.
areas real quick, Erica. This should be
Yeah.
good. So we do not. There's some like we are not allowed to use like heat sensing devices. That's basically a legal determination that has been made. It's considered an invasion of privacy if you basically take temperature from inside like a chimney to document the heat. And so that's not something that we're legally allowed to do. That picture that Jason showed you though, that was that was on that slide for that, that was like in the middle of the night. And so the technology that is becoming more and more available allows for better resolution to really capture it similar to what we would do during daytime hours. And so we're not having to use those types of pieces of equipment. The cameras capture what's outside. And so basically the legal determination is if it's visible from the outside, then it's okay.
Thanks, Ryan. There's also an interesting question about cars. And interestingly, cars with doing pollution that are causing a lot of pollution, doing donuts in the street. I don't know if that's something that's more air district or CARB, but it could also be law enforcement. Those are some cross-jurisdictional things. But it does look like there's some questions, and I'm not sure if that's better answered by the CARB team, the air district team, or who, but did want to flag that interesting comment as well.
Yeah, this is Brian Moore from CARB. I would think that'd be like local law enforcement. Breaking tire wear is a big issue, but I don't think CARB would enforce, like a driving violation like that.
Got it. Okay. I did want to ask our Air District friends to answer as many details as they can in the chat, and then obviously that helps with translation as well, so our folks that are reading in Spanish can read it as well. We'll turn it over to CARB for that presentation, and we'll come back and make sure everyone has gotten all of their questions answered on both items. So thank you for your patience. We just want to try and make sure that our CARB presentation goes on time, and then we'll come right back to this.
So Larry Taylor has his hand up. Did he just put it down? Okay.
Larry, did you need to ask your question first, or I know you had a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah, the other question was, for the do not burn season, November through February, I know there was some problem a couple of meetings ago that you were worried that you didn't want to have two people going in the same vehicle to record or check on complaints. So I was thinking, I have it in the chat, maybe you could contract with private security to meet your enforcement person, especially at night. And, it's not the safest places in town in the winter especially, but maybe you could have contract with security to meet your people there separately, their own car.
The main reason for that, Larry, was not, while we value the safety of all of our staff, and really it was safety from the perspective of one person being focused on driving while the other person was focused on trying to capture possible burning in fireplaces, and so not being distracted by doing one thing or the other. So that was more of the, when we discussed the safety aspects, that was more of the focus than area.
Yeah, well, that's a different focus I'm bringing up. That maybe
Okay.
you could contract with security to meet your person at the reported site, and they would have at least somebody along, so they could your staff would handle the recording device, or make write out the complaint, or investigate while security is there separately, keeping your staff safe.
Okay.
Not taking pictures while you're driving. I didn't ever mean that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
All right, thank you, Larry. So we'll go to CARB, and then we'll make sure that all of these questions are answered either in written writing or verbally as needed when the CARB enforcement update is done.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Good. My name is Eric Bissinger, and I'll be taking over for Justin Shields. Justin has been promoted within the Enforcement Division, and in the past I was his backup for South Central Fresno. So now I will be taking over the responsibilities and doing this update. For diesel enforcement sweeps, unfortunately, I apologize, we don't have the first quarter of 2021 inspection data. It's not available at this time. Our programmers are working to have the data regularly updated on a quarterly basis. If you want to see where the inspections have occurred in the past within the boundary and what the outcomes were, please take a look at our visualization enforcement tool. Brian said he would put the link in the chat to that enforcement tool. And in the past, we have found that inspections resulted in high compliance rates. Some of the programs we inspected were as high as 90%. So, because of these high inspection rates, we want to work with the steering committee to identify additional locations to inspect where we think some non-compliant diesel activity is occurring, idling or smoking trucks. And then and some of the COVID restrictions are now loosening up, and we are preparing to get out in the field and work with the district, hopefully later this month. And also for a more broader CARB enforcement view, we have our annual report is going to the board this summer, and it will describe all the activities that enforcement at CARB did statewide. So, okay, an update on our fleet audits and our cases. In Fresno, we currently have 3 cases. There is one, a new case that recently opened. It's a fuels case. And another one recently closed, which had illegal engine parts. And then in addition, we've had an ongoing transport refrigeration unit case that was initiated from our I think it was our first diesel sweep that we conducted in early 2020, before the pandemic. Okay, so on truck and bus update, CARB is estimating with our new annual report that's coming out that the truck and bus rule has a compliance rate that's greater than 90% statewide. This is up from around 77% in 2017. So using Fresno zip codes, in 2020, DMV placed registration holds on approximately 600 dirty diesel vehicles within the boundary using the zip codes. And these were all registered within the South Central boundary. And in 2021, we are estimated an additional 300, maybe 370 more dirty diesels that will not be able to register in 2021. And also in the last quarter of 2020, our PEAK system, which is it stands for Portable Emission Acquisition System. Basically, PEAKS is a portable emission and license plate reader that can check emissions of a vehicle as it passes under the system. So when they go under, it reads it and it reads the license plates. And so at the end of, when we were there at the end of 2020, we screened about 210 vehicles. It resulted in 2 citations. One was for excessive smoke and another one didn't have a diesel particulate filter installed. And both those owners paid their penalty and repaired their vehicles. Okay, for our SEP update for supplemental environmental projects. SEPs, they are funded with the money collected from our case settlements. And it's used to fund environmental projects in disadvantaged communities throughout California. And in Fresno, we have 2 projects funded, the Fresno Trees for green barriers and Fresno Asthma Impact Model to help family assess educate, diagnose, and receive care for asthma. And we are currently processing 3 other proposals. And if you have a project idea and you need some funding, please reach out to me. And finally, the anti-idling signs. We still have anti-idling signs are available. We have 2 kinds that we can distribute. One is for like a heavy-duty truck traffic area where they're idling, and another one that is designed for school districts. So please contact me if you have interest in helping me get these signs installed. And so that concludes my update, and just let me know if you have any questions.
Great, thank you, Eric and Jason. So I know that Jason was sharing his screen and might not have been able to add any of the additional answers to questions from his section, but I want to make sure we've covered all of those. While we're giving Jason a chance to type into the chat, are there any questions for Eric related to CARB and its enforcement? What's the help for people with asthma? I know there's a Spanish language question. I'm waiting for them to translate it to make sure I'm translating it correctly. But I do think there might be some questions from the Spanish language line.
Yes, it's saying that the help is for people with asthma, and that I have a son with asthma.
Hey, this is Brian from CARB. I think that might be in reference to Eric mentioned a project that the CCAC, the Kevin Hamilton, is working with. So we can get that information to them, but I think that's through what the awesome work that Kevin does, was a recipient of that Serp to help with his asthma identification and treatment program. So yeah, I can, if I can get that name from the interpreter, I can make the connections. Yeah, that helps. Or if Eric has anything to add, I think that's the Serp that was they're talking about, right? The CCAC one, Eric?
Yes, Brian, this is Warren. That would be correct.
Oh.
And I think that was Estella. Yes. So do you need, I mean, I don't know if that's something that you can put in the chat for her, or if you'd like her follow-up contact information from the Air District.
You know, I actually have Estella's email, so I'll have one of our Spanish speakers contact her so she doesn't have to bother emailing me. So I'll make sure to do that tomorrow.
Thank you,
Perfect.
Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, any other straggling questions on enforcement from the Air District or CARB that didn't get answered yet? I know there was a question about which locations, and I know that one didn't get tagged yet. Jason might be able to drop those into the chat for us, which is which locations were cited, which 3 facilities were cited in Jason's presentation, and I think all of the others have been addressed. I want to make certain of that. Let me just scan through. It does appear that everything else has been covered. If there is anything else, now's the chance to raise your hand before we move on to our standing update.
Yeah, and really quick, let me just add on the specifics for those. I didn't have the full list in front of me here ready to go, so I'll do some looking and see if I can find that here during the rest of the meeting. But we will have coming up after the end of this month, we'll be starting working on preparing our next annual report that we provide to the community, which does include all of our enforcement information for the whole year and does list the specific violations and the facilities for all of our violations. So I'll try to find those tonight and drop them in the chat, but if not, I can email those to you, follow up with you after the meeting, but we will have that report coming up later here this summer as well.
Great, thanks. And that was Genevieve's question. Excellent. I don't see any more hands at the moment about enforcement, so we're going to keep moving. The next agenda item is standing updates. And tonight we have updates from CARB again. Actually, this is on small off-road engine regulations. And then we're going to recap the recent subcommittee meetings and discuss some upcoming meetings of other subcommittees that this committee has requested to have formed and move forward with. So first we're going to go to CARB, and I think maybe Brian Moore or someone else from CARB to touch base on, Brian, what's happening with the small off-road engines.
Sure, no problem. This was actually brought up at the agenda setting meeting, so I wanted to let everybody know what's happening. So CARB does regulate emissions from small engines. So these are like under 25 horsepower. So the kind of engines you'd find in like lawn and garden equipment and other types of equipment. And when we look at that type of equipment, there are two types of emissions that we're concerned with. One are the actual engine exhaust. So when the engine's running, right? So CARB sets regulations on the emissions coming out of like the tailpipe. But there are also evaporative emissions. So anything when the engine's idle or running, when you've seen this when you've like filled up a lawnmower with gas, you kind of can see the vapors coming off of it. There are actually limits on the emissions from that evaporative pathway too. So I think what Larry was interested in was there's actually draft legislation working through the California Assembly. It's AB 1346. I can post the link to it. And that bill looks to go to zero. So basically eliminate emissions from those small engines by 2024 for new engines that are being made. So that's the idea with that law. Where that law is now, or the bill, it's gone through the Assembly where it originated. That's why it's an AB instead of a SB for Senate bill. And it went all the way through the subcommittees in the state Assembly, and the full Assembly voted to pass it on to the Senate. So now it has to go through that process through the Senate, a deliberative system of democracy, right? So now the Senate's gonna consider that bill, and they have not started that process yet. So that's the point we're at. I can also send a link to the bill, and it's really neat. You can actually check the status to see where the bill is at. So that's where we are with the bill. Kind of with the parallel process, CARB has also been workshopping changing our regulations on these small off-road engines on a similar timeline. So they're kind of like trying to accomplish the same thing. March, there was a workshop meeting, and Larry and anybody else interested, by fall, CARB is considering bringing new regulations on the emissions from these small engines to our board. And they're thinking around the same thing, like around that 2024 timeline, getting it to zero. So hopefully in the 2024 to 2028 timeline, we'll see zero emissions from those small off-road pieces of equipment. And I'll send links to all this stuff, CARB stuff, and the legislator stuff right when I finish talking too much. So yeah, so I don't know if anybody has any questions about the SOAR program. They can email me directly, and I can hook you up with project-specific staff that can answer questions. Yeah, and that's it.
Thank you, Brian. What questions or comments do we have for Brian, if any? Now's a great time to raise your hand. Looks like Larry's got a question.
Yeah, with Brian, I don't know if you mentioned that it was for this legislation was for banning the sale, but not the use of these, for example, leaf blowers.
Correct. So it would be moving
2.5 years. I think first of 24. So it's 2.5.
The current language, which I'll put in the chat, will show you. So the bill calls for it be coming into effect on January 1st, 2024, but it's not passed the Senate yet, the state Senate. So, but that's the language current. Yeah, and
I see it just got there.
Right, we can't regulate. CARB does not regulate how you use equipment, just the emissions coming out of it. Now there have been local, like county and city ordinances, like limiting the use of like leaf blowers and stuff. So that's kind of usually up to the cities, whereas CARB does regulate though the emissions coming out of the pieces of equipment.
Mm-hmm. So, but the bill wouldn't slow down the velocity of the dust that it blows around. It would just ban the sale of the item, but not the use.
Right. So, and when I looked at the bill, there's no language in there about like nozzle velocity, but the bills, sometimes bills change in the Senate. So if it changes, the Senate could change it. And if it changes drastically, then it goes back to the Assembly.
I see.
Because they're like, hey, this isn't the bill we voted on, so we want to see it again. So there's a lot of unknowns with that bill, but as of right now, it's through the Assembly and in the Senate's hands.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. I didn't see any other questions for Brian. I do see notes from Jason in the chat, just to make sure everyone takes a look at that. And without any further questions for CARB about this item, we're going to move on to the next update. And the next update is actually a recap of some of the recent subcommittee meetings that we've had. And the next one we're going to cover is actually going to be, I think, previewed by Janet for Vegetative Barriers.
So I'm on the
Hey, Janet,
vegetative.
Yes.
So during our subcommittee meeting, we were looking at the vegetative barriers and urban greening, and we noted that when the Serp was approved, money was put in vegetative barriers, but nothing was put in for urban greening. But later in our discussion, we noted that both were kind of combined. So during next month's full meeting, we were looking at bringing to the group, changing some of that and see if CARB can combine the two in the Serp so that there is money for urban greening as we move forward.
Can I complement the report?
Yes, because naming, yes, please do.
Yeah, this is Naomi. So thank you, Janet. That was a good summary, but I also want to say that two more things were suggested by the subcommittee. One was that money that was allocated originally for the locomotive is changed to add more money for this strategy. And also to remove the condition that was put in the Serp that said that first we were going to look for money and then the air district was going to match it. So we don't want to wait for a match. We're going to look for a match after money from this ABC 107 program is put into this combined strategies. And other committee members that were part of that conversation, Genevieve and others that want to chime in?
There any other committee members that want to give any more specifics on that committee meeting? Raise your hand or unmute yourself. I'm not seeing any hands. So it sounds like they covered it well, according to Genevieve. So it sounds like there are 3 requests that are coming out of that committee. And I think one of the things we talked about in the annual planning was really leveraging the committees to bring group consensus forward to the larger CSC. And so this is an example of that happening and moving forward. Sounds like Janet is recommending that at the next meeting, so that there's a noticing on the agenda and so that there's time to kind of think through how we can implement those 3 requests. This committee should be prepared to discuss it and maybe move it forward. From what I understand, the Air District is supportive of all of these measures, but there is a question about what approvals are needed. So if it needs to go to the Air District Board, it would need to go in August, which gives you time at the July meeting to discuss it, deliberate, and then move it forward. And then the Air District could then talk about it at their August meeting as needed, if there is any kind of approval needed for moving money and that kind of thing. Naomi.
Erica, I do have a question. I'm sorry. I was under the impression that we were already bringing forth that recommendation to be discussed and voted at this meeting. So I don't see why we need to wait until we voted in July and then for the Air District to take it to their board. I don't see the reason for that delay. In my opinion, we should take a vote now, and I'm happy to make the motion.
I will ask the Air District team about the logistics of whether the logistics of the vote for today or July makes sense. I know one thing, just from a governance standpoint, is it wasn't noticed on the agenda as a vote. So that's one little piece, but I think that certainly this committee has the flexibility in the Air District. If they have the information that they need, it may be appropriate to take it today.
And I think that was just to add to that point, Erica. I think that that's part of my question that I made earlier. That the way that I wasn't able to join the meeting where this agenda was created. So otherwise I would have made 125% sure that was spelled out. But I thought that because this was the recommendation by the subcommittee, by we presenting the report and that being in the agenda, that the understanding was that we were presenting this recommendation because that was part of the update and that we can move forward. So Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. Always putting me on the spot, but I appreciate it. I think from a logistics standpoint, kind of touching on what Erica and understanding what you're saying too, Naomi, I think with by not having it agendized as being something that's going to be voted on and discussed as like more in depth as opposed to just the subcommittee update, that there may have been other people that would like to weigh in and be a part of the conversation that maybe isn't afforded to because of the way it was agendized. So my recommendation would be to bring it back in July. So here's the situation. So we can't take it in June, and we don't have a board meeting in July. So I mean, the earliest we could take anything would be August at the earliest. So I mean, as from a timing perspective, I mean, while I understand what you're saying, I think by having it at the next one, making sure that it's agendized properly, so everybody understands what's going to be discussed, and making sure that everybody has the ability, because they have the understanding that it's going to be discussed, to participate in the discussion.
Well, I would like to hear from the others, but if you don't have a meeting in July, well, then if there's no delay on that. But I do want to make the recommendation that moving forward, when there is a recommendation, a formal recommendation by a subcommittee, that is spelled out in the agenda, so we don't have these vague understanding and we can interpret it in different ways.
Okay, no, that's a good point, and yeah.
And just for the record, I've added that to my notes for today as well, and it's part of that agenda setting kind of refinement. So much appreciated on those notes, and I'll send those forward as well to the air district, just as we're working through kinks, right? Making sure that all the pieces come together, and this is certainly one we want to get right. So I'll add that in and make sure it's reflected at the end of our meeting even today, so it's on the record again.
So just to clarify for the next meeting, do we need to actually establish how much money we want to move from the locomotive over to urban greening? Do we need to specify exactly what we're asking for and have it in writing?
That's an excellent question, Janet. We have not made any recommendations to move money around, so I think this is a new exercise for us as committee.
And that's part of the reason why we want to have that conversation too. And typically what we like to do is having talked with partners and kind of understanding what their ability to get the work done within the time periods has played a pretty important part. And so I know we've been talking a lot with Fresno, and I'm not sure if there's any other partners that do a lot of urban greening in coordinating those types of efforts to understand how much, what's a reasonable amount that could be expended within the timeframes.
And what would be the difference of that as opposed to, I know the Serp had it separate, or combining the two with that same money number and adding to it the locomotive funding from the locomotive?
Yeah, and that's how we put the incentive project plan together. We kind of put it together in one, I think, if I'm right, Aaron.
Yes, it's one project, but they're kind of separated out inside the project plan. So it's under one plan, but they're separated out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think Janet's question though is it a matter of all of the locomotive funding? I don't think that's necessarily, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know if that was the recommendation or if it was taking pieces of that to help supplement or fund. So I think that's where having that a little bit more time to think about it, having that July discussion on it, I think that does give us time. And to Ryan's point, that's and Naomi, it doesn't actually delay us because we're still, August is the earliest we could take it to our board anyway.
I agree, like process-wise, and I mean, there's opportunity for improvement and making sure that recommendations from steering committee are added to possible or recommended topics for subsequent CSC meetings.
Excellent. All right, thank you. So I think we did another process improvement today. We're doing it in real time, but I've made those notes, and I think that there's the opportunity certainly at the next meeting to both discuss the items, the 3 recommendations from that subcommittee, and then also discuss potential funding allocations and transfers. So that's two hefty items for next month. And then the action item from the Air District would be that if necessary, it would go to the August Air District Board meeting for Air District Board approval, assuming that that is the natural flow of that approval process. Okay, any other updates from the Vegetative Barriers Subcommittee before we move to the other subcommittee? All right, thank you both. Community air monitoring, that's our next subcommittee. Any updates from the Community Air Monitoring Subcommittee?
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Curtail. I'm the program manager for air monitoring here at the district. And I'll be, before I give a brief summary of the camp subcommittee meeting, just wanted to let you all know that we recently updated and enhanced our air monitoring, the pollution charts on the website. So I'm just going to show it really quickly for you before we start off on that one here. Let's see. Try to keep this quick. So, for example, when you click onto the site and you go to the into our air monitoring page, and what we've done is we've changed the chart. So the chart looks like this now, and you have the various states that you can jump to. It's a little bit better looking and easier to navigate through, and you can see the numbers, and there's numbers on the side as well too, if you want to look at that. And the big change really is adding the addition of additional pollutants. Before it was primarily Pm25 and ozone. Now we have even benzene, SO2, NO2, carbon monoxide, and all those that you can look through and at the various dates as well onto it. So we're pretty excited to have that up and running now. So when you guys get a chance, please take a look at it and let us know what you think, if you like any changes to it. So that's a quick share there. Let me stop that. Going to the camp subcommittee meeting, we had that on May 24th, about 2 weeks ago. We went over all the monitoring sites and the implementation status. Basically, everything's almost up. Everything's pretty much up and running except for Edison High School. And with that, we recently had a meeting, a site review with them just last week. So we should be pretty close to getting that implemented, hopefully here. We also went over all the emissions data that we've collected so far, and comparing those to between the different sites within the community, and also to the nearby regulatory air monitors outside of the community. And what we found in there was that they were tracking pretty consistently. We also talked about the Pm25 speciation and reviewed that. And the analysis shows that there's spikes in organic carbon from the wildfire smoke impacts in the summer and fall of 2020. And we did see increases in ammonium nitrate during the winter season. And these are things that were expected. In addition, we also went over the VOC speciation. And as far as the species that were detected, they were well below the OEHA reference exposure levels. But still, I think we still need more time and more data, and also further investigation, and to better understand the potential sources of these emissions. So overall, I think we have some pretty good data as a start, but we definitely still need more time through this and more data, so that through the continued monitoring to capture all the seasonal changes, and also to account for the impacts from COVID-19. As you know, when we transitioned into the with COVID-19, and so hopefully it looks like we're stepping out of that, and hopefully we can get back to status quo, everything returning to normal, and also get the emission readings from that and get a better understanding of the emission impacts. So moving forward here, we're going to continue with current air monitoring efforts with the stationary sites, the speciation analysis that we're doing, the air monitoring vans, and responding to the community as the needs, to the community needs and concerns. And also, like I had mentioned earlier, Fresno Unified, working with Fresno Unified to implement that very last final location at Edison High School. And we're also adding triggers to our air monitoring system, so that when we see spikes, we get notifications through emails and through text messages, so that we can deploy staff to the site to take a look at potential causes of those spikes, and also for our staff to review the data to ensure that that is valid data and it's not an equipment issue or anything like that. So that's pretty much what we had discussed at the camp subcommittee meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you guys have any.
Thank you, Chai. Does anyone have any questions for Chai, or either about the subcommittee or air monitoring in general? Looks like Lilia has a question. Hi, Lilia.
Sí, tengo una pregunta. Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Me disculpo. Nada más quiero saber cuándo se nos va a notificar a nosotros los padres que tenemos estudiantes en Roosevelt del monitor que tienen puesto ahí en el plantel. ¿Cuándo se nos va a notificar?
I just wanted to know when are the parents getting notifications about the monitor that you have in Rosemont? So that's what my question. I wanted to know, when are the parents being notified?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and Naimeen was there and she had some really great input on that as well. The notification, so our main objective ultimately is to have all of this get integrated with RAN, and that is taking a little bit of time, and we're definitely still putting a lot of work into that. It's a bit of a complicated system to integrate this with the regulatory system. So the ultimate goal is to put both of these into the same system, so that they don't have to go to the website to look for the information and all of that. That once they sign up for the RAN system, it'll automatically they can look through that and we'll get the notifications through there.
So did you have a specific timeline then, Chai? That I don't know if we got that answer.
Yeah, as far as the timeline, I know we've been working on that for quite a few months now, and that's still going to take maybe it's going to take another month or two onto that, but we'll definitely keep the committee updated on this, and every time that we're having these meetings, we'll provide you an update on that.
Okay, so not yet, but you're going to provide an update. Lilia's asking, raising her hand again.
And there's another item in there is that we're still talking internally onto this, but we may have to look at if there's any alternatives, something that we can do in the interim while that gets implemented and integrated, that maybe if there's any other way that this information can be relayed to the schools and to the parents, other than just them going onto the website and looking at the information. So that's something that's we're still discussing.
Okay, so there may be some alternative communication methods in the interim. I saw that Lilia had a follow-up question, so I want to go to her and then I'll acknowledge. I see Naimeen's hand as well. Lilia, do you have another question?
Es que no entendí bien la respuesta que me dieron. ¿Tenemos que registrarnos nosotros los padres para enterarnos? Porque yo me estoy enterando por estas juntas, pero los padres que tienen asistente a estudiantes ahí en la escuela son más de 2,000 estudiantes. Yo me entero por esta reunión, pero ¿qué pasa con los padres que no están en esta reunión? No entendí bien, perdón.
I didn't understand quite well the answer. So the parents, do we have to register to be able to be informed about this? Because I'm getting notified because I'm in this meeting, but the parents that have students in that place, there's more than 2,000 students there that they don't know anything, because I know because of these meetings, but I don't know, I didn't understand the answer.
Well, I think there's a couple things onto this. One is just understanding that we have the information available and they can look at the data. In terms of if there are any high readings or anything that may be unhealthy or that may impact the students or the community, that is an ongoing. We already have procedures in place to provide those notifications, and those have been in place for quite some time. And I don't know if Heather, if you may want to expand any further onto that, but those have definitely been in place to ensure that the parents and the students and the schools and the community knows of any type of event that may be of health concern to them.
Chai, may I say something about that? Sure. I think that, definitely your point of because there are two things that you're talking about when you can incorporate the data from this monitor into RAN. So everybody that is already in RAN or that would be subscribing to RAN can get those notifications. But I do agree that, you know, if you feel that you're not going to have that ready before the wildfire season starts, before the kids return to school, before the curtailment period starts, I think we need to be creative and come up with alternatives. And I had already mentioned this in the subcommittee. You guys have your house program. Why can't, for instance, once you see that there's a peak, when you see that why it's not a possibility, while that is done, for your team to be communicating this information to not only to the school districts, because I have by firsthand experience how broken is even. I'm not talking about the other school districts. I'm talking about Fresno because that's the one that I experienced a problem with, where you guys send a notification about a very bad air quality a couple of years ago during the wildfire, and it never went down to the schools. It never. The school day ended and kids were out when their air quality was horrible. So why can't the air district communicate directly to the staff of the schools where these monitors are, so then the school can make that information available to the parents and not wait until you finally merge these monitors data with RAN. And that could also be with the other school districts, not only Fresno.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a good point. And we agree that, we should have that secondary, that mechanism, interim mechanism in place to inform of any things like that.
Yeah, so I mean, that is a big part of the Healthy Air Living Schools program is trying to work with schools and school districts to make sure that they do participate in and use the various tools that we offer to help educate the parents of the students. It seems like more and more kids are getting cell phones themselves, and we definitely want to strongly encourage everybody to use the district app and to sign up for notifications. And I know this is a topic that Heather and her team work a lot with the schools on, encouraging them to use this and explaining the benefits and the importance of this. We know how important it is, especially when we have these really unhealthy air quality episodes. And Naomi, you used a great example of last year's wildfires. And the one thing I will say that what we are seeing from the differing air monitoring data is that they are tracking pretty closely. We see slight deviations from one to the next, but it's not to the extent where you would, that it would be so much that it's likely to be like this location has an alert. Meanwhile, the one a few miles away wouldn't. I mean, if air quality is that bad, it's that bad for pretty much all the monitors in the area. And so that's a important point too. Where this monitoring is going to be helpful for us is using the data to help us maybe identify sources, using speciated data to help us figure out what's contributing to maybe some of the higher readings, so that that may result in more discussion of additional strategies that need to be looked at and addressed through the AB 617 process. But
I think to Ryan's point and to your point and Lilia's point too, Naimeen, is I think the earlier we get people to sign up for RAN, the better. That way, when and if we start adding, all of these monitors, people are already familiar, they're signed up, because no matter what right now, adding monitors just kind of changes which notifications people get necessarily, but it doesn't mean that you can't sign up right now and not get that information. So you can sign up right now and you will get alerts, even if it's not for that Malaga monitor or the different monitors that Chai's been talking about. But to Ryan's point, you will right now, if there was a wildfire right now and anyone in this community, and everyone I should say in this community signed up, they would get the alerts if any of those monitors spiked.
we do actually, things have changed a little, Naimina. I know it's an ongoing process, you know, our communication with the schools, but we've been collecting contact information. So, you know, while our primary mission is to get them to sign up for RAN and make sure all the administrative folks and teachers and folks are using RAN, we have been amassing contacts for the last 3 years, 5 years, you know, more, but specifically in this shorter history, we've got the ability to send a message, an email quickly, and we do, and we actually do hear back. So major issue, probably RAN alerts are headed out, but we're also going to send a very concentrated email to those educators and get word out to teachers and other people that we have in our contact. But none of it is enough, but just so you know, we're working that angle all the time.
Great. I don't see any more hands or comments, and I want to give you one last chance. If you have any additional questions about air quality monitoring at schools, specifically the camp subcommittee, now's the chance before we move on. Great. And then I'll just want to flag that Amelia is doing excellent translation, so I did want to flag that. Certainly we appreciate not only our Spanish-speaking participants, but also our translation team. They're fantastic. All right, so we are moving on to our next agenda item. Well, it's the same agenda item, but it's just additional updates, and most of these are calendaring updates. The first thing to note is there are a couple of upcoming subcommittee meetings. We've got school buses, school air filtration, truck rerouting, and the newest one, which is land use. Oh, I'm not sure if that was an accidental unmute or a hand. I think it might be accidental unmute, so we'll leave that one alone. So again, there are 4 different upcoming subcommittee meetings. So the first thing you should do is check your emails for scheduling related to all of these meetings. A couple of them already are scheduled. Truck rerouting is scheduled for Wednesday, June 9th. That's in 2 days at 5 p.m. School filtration has just been confirmed. You just got an email about that today, and that's Monday, June 14th. That's a week from today at 3 p.m. The scheduling for school buses, I think that's still in progress, so look for more details about that. And then the newest committee, which is land use and the MOU, which is hotly discussed and debated and has been moving forward with some initial coordination. So a number of you have expressed interest in that. Thank you. An email has also been sent to the entire committee. CSC is gauging interest for, so if you have an interest as a CSC member in being on that committee, feel free to let the Air District know. Anybody can join that committee. Everyone will get updates about that committee. So even if you don't sign up for it, I believe you can still participate in that committee once that agenda is set. It's just good to know how many people are really interested. And so in addition, I think I understand that the Air District's been in touch with the city of Fresno to explore participation in that meeting as well, which is a really important part of the conversation that you all had. And I believe Jennifer Clark and others from the city of Fresno have been looking forward to attending that first meeting. So that's moving forward. The date on that is not yet scheduled, but I believe it hasn't been scheduled because they wanted some city confirmations, and they're going to move forward this week with coordinating that next committee meeting. So please look out for that one, which I know is very, a lot of interest in that from the CSC. Any questions about those committee updates or upcoming subcommittees before we move into wrap up and reminders and showing you your action items? I don't see any hands, and I don't hear any people, and I don't see anything in the chat. So we're going to keep going, but keep me honest because I might not see your hand. And I'll also ask Janet, if you see anything that I don't, please weigh in. All right, so we are going to move into wrap up. I see Jessica unmuted, but if you don't need to, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say Janet actually had to go, but she appreciated and she just sent her thanks to everyone. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Good thing you told me, or I would have called on her. Waited. So as we move into the wrap up, just a couple updates and reminders. You know, Janet was our community co-host today, and you all have an opportunity to volunteer to be a community co-host, and you can put your own personal touch on this meeting and talk about the structure and the agenda and your approach to the meeting. Everybody does it a little bit differently, and we are open to all styles. And so we are looking for volunteers for the next meeting. So if you do sign up, we will work with you, or the Air District will, in advance to create that agenda and your approach and whatever you're comfortable with. So, you know, you can do as much or as little as you'd like in every meeting, and we're certainly flexible for those that have scheduling challenges as well that need to leave a little early. No worries, we got your back on that too. So if you do want to to sign up, please raise your hand, your blue hand or your Zoom hand, and put your name in the chat, and the Air District will add you to the queue. And I don't see any hands at the moment, but I am certainly happy to continue to keep that chat open over the course of the rest of the meeting and make sure that we capture anybody. And you can also always email the Air District if you're interested in being the community co-host for the day. Next thing you said is you wanted to see those live notes. So I'm going to show you those notes now. Let me do a screen share in just a second, and then you'll be able to view what we've seen so far, and then we'll go into those final comments I see that have just been posted in the chat. Bear with me as I share my screen. Oh, one sec. There we go. And let me do this. Okay, so you should be able to see, and I'll make this a little bit bigger. Cancel. Let me just make you a little bigger. Hopefully you can view this. The first action item that we have is to be a little bit more clear about timing and process for providing agenda feedback. And there's an email that goes out every month before the final agenda goes out. So clarify in that email with that draft agenda and provide a deadline for written feedback in case someone can't attend the agenda setting meeting. And that's something that the Air District will do by the next meeting. The next item I had a question mark about, and I'll ask Naimeen to unmute and make sure I have it right. It's to send a follow-up on the latest Title V permit for Rio Bravo, I think was the name that you gave, just to make sure that 2004 was not the latest version of the permit that they have. And then send information about, oh, correct. Awesome, thank you. Send information about support for people with asthma, and that's something that CARB's going to do, and I believe it was, I want to say it was Lilia, but he definitely has that information available to share. And then also, we're going to send information about the 3 facilities that were cited about enforcement activities, and also sending the link to the enforcement report with a full activity summary. There was a link included in the chat today, but I think there's going to be another follow-up that maybe is going to be sent to the entire CSC, but it's specifically related to the enforcement activities that were discussed by Jason. And then we're going to ensure that the 3 Vegetative Barriers Subcommittee recommendations are moved forward as voting action items in the next CSC meeting. That's something that's going to be added to the next meeting agenda, so you'll see that posted by the Air District at the next meeting. And then from a process standpoint, we got to figure out how to ensure that any future subcommittee actions or recommendations are actually automatically added to the next CSC agenda, or at least brought to the next agenda setting meeting to confirm the best time to discuss it. And one thing I noted in here is that you guys might need to establish a consistent record-keeping process for this during each one of these committee meetings to make sure that there's clarity on how that gets moved forward and who takes that note. But certainly something that can move forward, and the Air District has committed to that. And then the last thing is ensuring that there are various communication mechanisms with individual schools that have monitors to make sure that air quality notices go out to impacted school sites, even if the school district doesn't send out things across the district. Now Ryan did note, though, that so far air quality has been pretty broad and impacting an entire swath of communities. So it's typically been multiple sites rather than just one site. But we did want to make note of this request in this meeting notes. And so certainly it will be up to the discretion of the Air District on how far they can take this specific recommendation. But I did want to flag it and then make a note of the note. I'm going to open up the chat and just make sure I'm not missing any. Oh, Estella, thank you. It was Estella that made the comment about asthma, and I will put that in my notes as well. Did I reflect the comments and action items requested from this committee in this meeting? And if I didn't, please unmute yourself, let me know what to edit and or add it to the chat, and I'll drop it in today. I don't see any edits. I will add Estella's name to make sure there's no question on who. Send information to Estella. Hold on one second. And I think those are your action items that will go to the Air District and be translated and sent to all of you so that you can use those during your committee conversations, and that you can use those as kind of to think about, too, what's coming forward to your next agenda setting meeting. All right, so I think we've moved into public comment. So this is the time. We do it in every meeting when we check for public comment. So I will ask for help from Heather on social media to check for public comments and check the Facebook, the YouTube, and the email address. And then I'll ask for Hannah's help checking the chat comments and or others that might have dropped in comments that are on the Zoom line.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please, if you're on the Zoom.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I put in what we need. Thanks.
Awesome. I will go in and read 1 second. And if you did want to raise your hand, please raise your hand using *9. All right, let me scroll back through. Oh, thanks, Heather. Okay, so it looks like we've got from a YouTube chat, Laura has said, asking if we can plant fruit trees or bamboo since climate change is expected to cause food shortages. So, and this might be a specific question for the Vegetative Barriers or Urban Greening Committee, but request to plant fruit trees or bamboo in light of climate change potential food shortages. And then the other comment is, could trains that come to Fresno plug into electricity instead of idle? Interesting question, and I'm not certain who the subject matter expert would be to answer that. If anyone is on the line that can answer either of Laura's questions, now's a great time to do so. Otherwise, we might need to follow up directly, and I know that many of you have Laura's contact information. Okay. I am not seeing an answer to that question at the moment, but what we will do is certainly keep this record and make sure that, and I'll actually plop it into the action items as well, see if we can't get those questions answered directly to Laura before the next meeting. I'm not seeing any other hands, and I'm not seeing any other comments. Oh, I did see one comment from Greg Barfield. It's a common one that we get, that there is insufficient infrastructure to charge trains. So as it relates to that specific comment, not the fruit trees, but the trains, it doesn't sound like that's something that's possible at the moment, but certainly something to look forward to in the future between partnerships with maybe the city, the county, and maybe the utilities around that. But not at the, and obviously the rail. So not something that can be done right now, Laura, but I will ask the Air District and or maybe one of the subcommittees to follow up with your recommendation on the fruit trees. Okay, I think we have reached the end of this meeting, and this is about the time that we ask our co-host to provide any closing comments, and our co-host isn't here tonight, so I will open it up to any other CSC members before we turn it over to the Air District to officially adjourn our meeting.
I stepped away, so I don't know if this was already addressed, but it is someone's birthday today.
Oh, I'm so glad you did.
To sing to Miss Erica. She's facilitated your meeting on her birthday. I know. Yes. That was my face too, I mean, when I found girl. So we have a tradition. I'm not as good as Jamie is, but we go 1, 2, 3, and we all sing at the same time with our microphones off of mute, and it's terrible and wonderful at the same time.
And so, you deserve it.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday
to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. I'm going to celebrate my 21st birthday, Eric Payne. I think I will have a glass of wine in all of your honor today.
Yeah, you should invite us for drinks.
Yeah,
I know.
The same glass, though,
that is my preferred meeting time and location is always over a happy hour or cocktail.
I know.
So thank you guys.
Well, happy birthday.
Well, thank you for that. It was a great birthday, and I'm grateful to you all for hanging out with me on my 21st birthday. I wish it were my birthday. Well, with that, if there's no other closing comments, we will absolutely adjourn this meeting and say have a wonderful rest of your week, everybody.